He has a suspect pinned against the wall, his badge is hanging by a thread, and for about 3 seconds you are watching Danny Reagan decide what kind of man he actually is.
I said sit down!
And there it is. That is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to Blue Bloods Moments, the only channel dedicated entirely to 14 seasons of the Reagan family, the NYPD, and every scene that made you stop breathing for a second. Today we are going deep on Danny Reagan, Donnie Wahlberg's career-defining role, and the moments he completely, totally, spectacularly lost it. Hit subscribe so you do not miss more Blue Bloods moments, because we upload 3 times a week, and this is only the beginning. Act 1. The man who operates at 110%. Blue Bloods knew exactly what it had in Danny Reagan from the jump, and Season 2 makes that case early and without apology. Most cop show leads carry a temper as a character accessory, something they pull out when the plot needs it. But Danny Reagan's anger reads less like a trait and more like a baseline condition. The suspect in this scene plays it smart on the surface, cooperative, polite, working the system the way people work the system when they know how it runs. And you can track the exact moment Danny decides he is done engaging with any of that. What Donnie Wahlberg does here is refuse to telegraph it. No wind-up, no warning look, just a switch that flips. And that transition from contained to detonated is something he executes better than almost anyone working in network drama during this era.
He told me so himself, even had pictures on his phone.
And who shot Hector Flores?
The smirk disappears about 2 seconds before Danny raises his voice, and that detail is worth pausing on, because even the guy being interrogated can read what is coming before the audience can. One of the most consistent triggers across the entire 14-season run is a suspect who believes they are smarter than Danny Reagan, and Season 4 gives us one of the cleanest examples of what happens when that belief collides with a detective who has learned every inch of the rulebook, not to stay within it, but to know exactly how far past it he can operate. A lawyer is present in this scene, which means Danny's options are technically limited, and what follows is one of the most creative displays of barely legal interrogation the show ever staged. Every sentence lands inside the rules, every implication sits well outside them, and the defense attorney cannot find a single thing to object to, even as she watches it happen in real time. Fans who watched this live still talk about the look on her face.
Behave, detective.
Left something of yours at the hospital, Curtis. Thought you might want it back.
That is a man who has sat across from Internal Affairs enough times to map the exact coordinates of the line, not because he wants to stay behind it, but because knowing where it sits tells him precisely how far over it he can go. Season 1 matters here, because this is where Danny Reagan arrives on screen already fully assembled, already carrying weight the audience has not been given context for yet. The pilot does not ease you in with a warm introductory case where he plays by the book and earns your trust before revealing his edges. He shows up with the edges already showing, and this early interrogation scene is the first time you clock that this show is not going to give you a standard procedural hero. The writing asks the question here that it will keep asking across 14 seasons, which is whether the method matters if the outcome is justice, and it asks it without answering, which is exactly the right call. Wahlberg's physicality in this scene is a deliberate performance choice, the way Danny fills and owns the space in that room before he has said a single word to the suspect. Season 1. Donnie Wahlberg is doing something specific with how Danny takes up space in that room, making himself the most dangerous presence before he has spoken, and that reads as a performance decision rather than anything written on the page. Act 2. When it costs him something. Here is where the video shifts, because anger that entertains is one thing, and anger that pulls real consequences into a scene is something else entirely. Mid-series Internal Affairs stops functioning as background texture and becomes an actual threat, and Danny has pushed far enough that the institution he has served his whole adult life is now examining whether he gets to keep serving it. Frank Reagan enters this scene not as Danny's father, but as the police commissioner, and Tom Selleck plays Frank's restraint here as its own quiet devastation, a man holding two roles simultaneously and finding no comfortable place to stand in either of them. Danny does not slam a wall in this scene, does not raise his voice, and the anger that surfaces is so much quieter than anything in Act 1 that it hits harder than all of it combined. Danny does not argue back, and somehow that silence lands as more alarming than any version of him shouting would have been. Cases push Danny to his edge, but family pulls him clean over it, and Season 6 shows you the distance between those two versions of him with uncomfortable clarity. Someone has made the mistake of threatening someone Danny loves, and what follows ranks among the most visceral scenes in the show's run, not for volume or physical contact, but for the specific temperature of Danny's voice, which sits at cold and certain in a way that reads as far more dangerous than anything he does in an interrogation room. Iraq War veteran is listed in Danny Reagan's backstory as background detail, but scenes like this one remind you that it is load-bearing information, that the man operating at maximum intensity in every episode has seen real violence and carries it somewhere underneath all of that detective instinct.
You ever disrespect my wife again, that blade will go through your throat like a stick of butter, you got it?
Donnie Wahlberg is not performing fear of himself in this scene, and that absence of self-doubt is exactly the thing that makes the scene frightening to watch. Blue Bloods earns its reputation for moral complexity most clearly not in the interrogation room, but in the moments where the people who love Danny most refuse to let him off the hook. Erin Reagan, Danny's sister and an ADA who has spent her career threading the needle between family loyalty and the law, delivers one of her most direct confrontations here, and Bridget Moynihan plays it without softening the edges. The thread has pulled tight, and Erin is not interested in maintaining the peace at the cost of the truth. Danny's first instinct is visible, the reflex to fire back, and then he looks at her and does not, because she is not wrong, and some part of him has already registered it. This is the scene that separates Blue Bloods from lesser procedurals, holding its lead accountable through the person who loves him and will not stop loving him even while she tells him he went too far.
It's a disaster, that's what happened.
It doesn't matter. Can you just tell
What
me
did
what
you
happened?
think you were doing?
What do you mean what I was doing? I was saving a little girl's life.
What, so this pervert can go prey on some other girl?
That micro moment where he pulls the reflex back is Wahlberg doing some of his best work in the entire series, because it tells you everything about what Erin's opinion costs him. Season 8 brings the question the show has been circling since the pilot into full view, which is what years of operating at this intensity actually do to a person over time. Danny Reagan has run at maximum capacity for the better part of a decade at this point, inside the fiction and on screen, and the anger in this interrogation scene carries a different texture than anything in Act 1. It is not sharp or explosive. It is worn down and grinding, the kind of tired fury that comes from a man who has had enough of being angry and cannot stop. A partner in the building is the only reason this scene does not escalate beyond the point of return, and the show uses that intervention to show you exactly how far Danny has gone without needing to show you the full consequence of it.
If I gotta step on your throat to get that piece, so be it.
Partners stepping in to pull Danny back from the edge is a recurring device the writers deploy throughout the series, and it functions as a measuring stick for exactly how far over the line he has traveled. A.K. 3. The Why. Season 3 gives us the scene that reframes everything that came before it, and it does not take place in an interrogation room. Danny is not threatening anyone, not circling a suspect, not operating in the mode the audience has spent 7 episodes learning to read. What surfaces instead is the weight underneath all of that, the Iraq War trauma that the show has referenced as backstory, and here treats as an active, present force in his life. Underplaying is the choice Wahlberg makes, and after the volume of the previous episodes, that quiet lands like something structural giving way. The flashbacks are not decorative backstory. They are the explanation for every scene that came before this one.
Stupid kid.
The silence here hits harder than the shouting does anywhere earlier in this video, and that contrast is entirely intentional. Jackie Curatola meant something specific to everyone who watched Blue Bloods from the beginning, and her departure, handled off-screen in one of the most abrupt exits the series ever produced, removed something from Danny Reagan that no subsequent partner fully replaced. She was not only his partner in the procedural sense, she functioned as a counterbalance, someone who knew the exact moment to pull him back and who actually could. The scene shortly after her exit reveals what her presence had been doing for him across the seasons prior, and it does so by showing you what her absence looks like in practice. The lid is gone, and what that means for Danny Reagan going forward becomes visible here, in a way the writers never fully addressed in dialogue, which Wahlberg filled entirely through performance across the seasons that followed. Watch his eyes in scenes from season 3 onward, and something that was present before her exit is no longer there, and Wahlberg carries that absence without the script ever naming it directly. This is the scene that comes to mind when someone asks what Danny Reagan is actually about, and it is not one of the interrogation slams, not one of the rule breaks, not one of the moments from Act 1 that made this video's title accurate. A damaged man doing a necessary job the only way he knows how is standing in front of someone he loves, and he cannot explain himself in terms that sound reasonable, because the explanation is not reasonable and he knows it. 14 seasons of Blue Bloods built toward this kind of moment, the one where the anger falls away and what sits underneath it is honest and broken and entirely human. And the fact that Donnie Wahlberg made audiences love Danny Reagan across all of those seasons through every excessive interrogation and every internal affairs complaint is the real achievement of this character and this performance. They're
Putting on a real brave face out here, but between me and you, having a really hard time, babe.
There is a version of Danny Reagan who processed the trauma, followed the rulebook, and became the detective the NYPD describes in its training materials, and Blue Bloods never introduced us to that man, which is the right call, because that show would not have run 14 seasons. 14 seasons, one man who could not turn it down, and a performance that made you root for someone you probably should not have rooted for half as hard as you did. Danny Reagan was the engine of Blue Bloods, and whether his methods made you cheer or cringe or land somewhere in the complicated space between those two reactions, he was never boring for a single episode across the entire run. Every moment in this video connects back to the same root, a man who cares so much it breaks him repeatedly and keeps showing up anyway, and that is the thesis of the character from the pilot through the season 14 finale. Here is the question for the comments, and this one genuinely divides the fan base. Was Danny Reagan the best or worst cop on Blue Bloods? Because both arguments hold up, and which one you land on says something real about how you watch television. Drop your answer below. Next video, we turn the camera on Frank Reagan, the man who watched all of this across 14 seasons and had to decide repeatedly whether being Danny's father outweighed being his police commissioner, and that one lands differently than anything in this video. You just watched times Danny Reagan completely lost it on Blue Bloods, and if any of these moments hit you the way they hit on first viewing, you already know exactly why this show still has people talking a full year after the finale.